So you might have seen in the news that King Charles III of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland and the Pope Leo XXIV prayed together for the first time, creating a historic moment. Now, while it's true this is the first time the head of the Anglican faith, King Charles, has prayed with the Pope, a lot of news organisations have been spouting that, for the first time in almost 500 years, a British monarch has publicly prayed with the Pope during King Charles's visit to the Vatican. This to me implies that 1. Henry VIII apparently prayed with the Pope at some point before he broke England away from Rome in 1534, or that the King of the Scots was also regularly going to Rome to pray with the Pope. The second point, it was rare for a king from Britain to pray with the Pope. So if we go before Henry VIII, there are only a handful of kings from Britain that have made the pilgrimage to Rome, and might have met the Pope, and some might have even prayed with the Pope. So the question is, who was the last king from Britain to pray with the Pope before King Charles? I have to say, however, before we begin, that there are so many historical jokes here for this meeting. If you were in England in 1647 and you heard that King Charles had prayed with the Pope, you'd be shocked and angry, as the island of Britain was in a state of civil war. One of the major reasons behind it was a religious one. King Charles I was the head of the Church of England and Scotland, but he was married to a French Catholic and was accused of doing rather Catholic things. And as I'm from the city of Worcester, which got absolutely devastated during the final battle of the British Civil Wars, where King Charles II had arrived in Worcester with a mostly Scottish army, which faced and lost against Oliver Cromwell's army. So when the news first broke, that's where my mind went. So there's some historical irony here that the current King Charles prayed with the Pope, although I can imagine that some people today were annoyed that King Charles did this. But all the talk and the news about the historical moment got me thinking about the kings who may have prayed with the Pope. Of course, this covers over 1,000 years of British history, going over the kingdoms in Britain and their kings. So, let's go through each king that has visited Rome with some context behind each visit. I'm sticking to the Middle Ages for this topic, as that's my area of interest. So once we get up to Henry VIII, that's it. So let's begin with the Anglo-Saxon kings. So the first king we have that visited Rome is King Cadwalla of the West Saxons or Wessex. He visited Rome to be baptized, the Anglo-Saxon chronicles state. Here, King Cadwalla went to Rome and received baptism from Sergius the Pope, and he gave him the name Peter. And 7 days afterwards, on 20 April, he passed away under the clothes of Christ, and he was buried within St. Peter's Church. And Ine succeeded to the kingdom of Wessex after him, and ruled 27 years, and afterwards departed to Rome, and remained there until his last day. There you go. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles just gave us 2 for 1 there. The next king is told to us from Bede. In the 4th year of Osred's reign, Cendred, who for some time had reigned most honourably over the Mercians, relinquished the kingship. Still more honourably, he came to Rome, where he received the tonsure and became a monk during the pontificate of Constantine, and he remained there till the day of his death, devoting himself to prayers, fasting, and almsgiving at the shrines of the apostles. Bede further adds that another king joined Osred, Offa, king of Essex, so again 2 for 1 on kings there. So that's 4 Anglo-Saxon kings that might have prayed with the Pope. The next Anglo-Saxon king to visit Rome wouldn't be until quite some years after King Cendred in 709, with King Aethelwulf of Wessex visiting Rome in 855. However, in 853, Aethelwulf had sent his son Alfred. Yes, the later Alfred the Great. In the Life of King Alfred by the Welsh monk Asser, he states that in the same year King Aethelwulf sent his son Alfred to Roman state, accompanied by a great number of both nobles and commoners. At this time, the Lord Pope Leo was ruling the Apostolic See. He anointed the child Alfred as king, ordaining him properly, received him as an adoptive son, and confirmed him. Then in 855, Alfred would again go to Rome, this time with his father, again Asa states. He also travelled to Rome that year in great state, taking his son Alfred with him for a second time on the same journey, because he loved him more than his other sons. There he remained for a whole year. After this, he returned to his homeland, bringing with him Judith, daughter of Charles the Bold, King of the Franks. So Alfred shares a similarity with King Charles III, as they both met popes named Leo, a historical coincidence. However, because Asa does not state the month King Aethelwulf and the Etheling Alfred visited Rome in 855, as Pope Leo died in July 855, and as both Asa and the Anglo-Saxon chronicles both state they stayed for a year, there is the possibility that they may have met and prayed with the next pope, Benedict III. Then there is Burgred of Mercia. He was expelled from his kingdom in 874 due to the Vikings. He died in Rome shortly after his arrival. This is the last time an Anglo-Saxon king would visit Rome, as due to the Viking raids and later invasions, this made it rather difficult to make the long and dangerous journey to Rome, plus the fact that after the formation of England under Aethelstan in 927, quite a number of Anglo-Saxon kings of England died young. So now let's move on to the Kingdom of England, and the first king of England to visit the Pope was Cnut, the Viking king of England. He had conquered England in 1016 in a bloody, brutal conquest. Cnut also had his own personal empire, the North Sea Empire, and by 1027, Cnut was in Rome to attend the coronation of a new Holy Roman Emperor, Conrad II. The Anglo-Saxon chronicles simply mention the event with no other context. Unsurprisingly, the texts are hostile to Cnut's reign, as his empire and legacy was gone by 1042. But there are other accounts, including a letter from Cnut to his subjects. The letter is rather long, so if you want to read the whole letter for yourself, check the references in the top comment tab or video description tab, there's a link there. But in all aspects of this coronation, Cnut is treated as an equal to the soon-to-be emperor, and Cnut discussed matters of state, tolls, and better rights for his subjects, and for Cnut's own personal salvation for his many sins. The trip, according to nearly all the sources, was a resounding success, and Cnut seemed to get along great with the new emperor and Pope John XVIII. So that's it for the English kings in the early Middle Ages. No Norman kings of England visited the Pope, nor any Angevin kings, the major reason being the amount of land and vassals the kings had to deal with. Taking time to visit the Pope would cost time, money, and energy. Plus, the kings had their own papal legates as the Pope's representative in England. Some famous papal legates were King Stephen's brother, Henry of Winchester, and Henry VIII's papal legate, Cardinal Wolsey. Now, the final English king before Henry VIII's break with Rome is Edward I in 1273. So, if we go along with that, then it's not 500 years, but over 700. The context of King Edward meeting the Pope is Edward was coming back from the 8th Crusade. His father, King Henry III, had died in 1272, so Edward was making his way back to England to be crowned king. And on the journey back, he stayed with Pope Gregory X for 2 months at Orvieto. It's highly likely they prayed together. After all, Edward was a crusader, and a popular one at that. So that's the Anglo-Saxon and later kings of England. Now on to the next kingdom in Britain, the Kingdom of the Isles, which was a small kingdom from the 9th to the 13th century of different isles around Scotland and England. None of their kings/earls visited the Pope. The next kingdom is the Kingdom of Alba, Pictland, Scotland. From one Scottish source, we have a king's reputation making its way to Rome. Kenneth, Alpin's son, king of the Picts, died, and this verse was composed. That Kenneth, of many stables, is dead, causes weeping in every house. There is not under heaven one king so good as far as to the borders of Rome. So not quite there. However, there is one king of Scots who made it to Rome. Come what may, time and the hour runs through the roughest day. Macbeth. The Mariana Scotus Chronicle, written in the same century as Macbeth's reign, states that the King of Scotland, Macbeth, scattered money like seed to the poor at Rome. So, as Macbeth made it to Rome, the state of affairs in Scotland must have been somewhat peaceful if Macbeth made the long journey there. While the source doesn't state that Macbeth visited nor prayed with the Pope, I think he would have at least tried to meet the Pope. But that's it for the kings in Scotland, only one. But given how tumultuous Scottish kingship was, I'm not surprised that only one king made it to Rome. Our next kingdom is the Kingdom of Strathclyde, an obscure Brythonic kingdom that was located between what is now northern England and southern Scotland. There really isn't much information on this kingdom. There is a record of maybe one of their kings abdicating and making a pilgrimage to Rome. The Annals of Ulster, an Irish source, simply states that, in 975, Donal, son of Owen, king of the Britons, died on pilgrimage. That's everything for Strathclyde. Now on to our final kings from the kingdoms in Wales. Wales in the Middle Ages had many kingdoms within it, sometimes united, sometimes not. Our first king to travel to Rome was Cnut, king of Powys. He had fled his kingdom due to renewed attacks from the kingdom of Mercia, leaving Powys under the control of King Rodri. Either he was forced or willingly left his kingdom is up to interpretation of the sources. Regardless, he made his way to Rome, dying there in 855 or 856. The second king from Wales to visit Rome is a king named Hywel. The Welsh annals simply state, Hywel died in Rome. The kingdom he was ruler of is most likely the kingdom of Glywysing. Asser states that he had submitted to King Alfred alongside many other Welsh kings, which Asser mentions that each king gained support, protection and defense. There isn't much information on the circumstances of the trip, so one interpretation could be that with the kingdom safe from attack from 1, other Welsh rulers, and 2, from the Vikings, Hywel could leave knowing that it was safe to make the pilgrimage to Rome, in which he died there. Our final king from Wales is one who made the trip and came back from Rome, Hywel Dda, one of the most powerful Welsh kings who nearly controlled all of Wales in 942. He made the journey to Rome in 928, the Welsh annals stating Hywel journeyed to Rome. One later tale is that Hywel visited Rome in order for the Pope to bless the law of Wales. The late Welsh historian John Davies stated the laws were, "The law is among the most splendid creations of the culture of the Welsh." One other reason for the trip might be one of deep mourning, as Hywel's wife Ellen died in the same year. But as with most early Welsh kings, information and context is always lacking, much to my frustration. Regardless, Hywel is the only Welsh king to make the journey to Rome and return. In conclusion, many kings from different kingdoms made the journey to Rome from Britain. Although there is no direct account stating that each king publicly prayed with the Pope as King Charles did, there's every reason to believe some did. But as for the question of who was the last king from Britain to pray with the Pope, before Henry VIII broke away from the Catholic Church. It's Edward I of England. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this video, you can now watch this video and others ad-free if you're a member of the Patreon or YouTube channel membership, which also gives you bonus videos. Thank you again.